So what is compassion? To make something that seems very abstract, to try to define it a little bit, I think is very helpful, because compassion was a very abstract idea to me, and I hope this is helpful. So think of compassion as this high vibration that emanates from the heart. And you could state that you get that from connecting with your heart, from having life experiences where you run into these higher level sensations like joy, sincerity, kindness, excitement, glee, being ecstatic. And that is your development of your compassionate heart. And then how do we know? Like, that's what the universe does, is it gives us a response from the outside world when to use compassion. So that is empathy. That is that connection to seeing the suffering in somebody else and then rising to do something about it. And so empathy, you can actually feel it. And, just use an example of watching a video where somebody gets hit in the private parts and knocks them on the ground. A lot of us can actually feel that sensation because we've been there and we understand what that feels like. It's like this empathetic charge that we feel. And so the idea is that when we are in tune and in harmony, we get this empathetic response from the world that says, "Ooh, compassion is needed here." And then the idea is that we go into the heart and resonate these higher frequencies, and that is our gift to help in that situation. Now, we're talking about if you see somebody getting hurt, that empathy will drive you to action sometimes, but that's not always the case. In fact, now let's look at the idea of empathy within the Paradigm A model. The Paradigm A model is basically the egoic state of control, and it is about false identities, basically, that we create within the pattern of construction that came before us with our history books, with what is going on in our world. We say, okay, here's the frameworks. You got left, right, conservative, liberal, control psychology, codependent narcissism. You have all of these things, and then our minds and our egos have created identities so that we can compete within those hierarchies. And so what ends up happening is, well, especially today, I'm just going to try to use philosophical understanding when I'm saying that is like a really blatant example, and that is our media. We have in no more time seen as much human suffering in one day than people saw years ago, because our media, it just keeps regurgitating stories because we're drawn to all these horrible stories, and it could be because we're connected to that empathetic response. But then it's, what do we do about it? And so in Paradigm A, it is about right and wrong and good and bad. So we create our characters to be good characters, or, well, most people want to be good characters to fit into the society, and then you got the rebels who move outside of society. But let's just stick with those that are conformed to the Paradigm A mindset. So you get up and you watch all of these horrible things happening, and now you're holding in your mind, wherever you are, wherever your little identity has put you on these other uh, continuums, like progressive or liberal or conservative, and then you measure your then you go into a different mode with empathy, because now you tribalize, because now if you're, let's say, conservative, then you are going to you will give empathy to other conservatives or to conservative ideas, and you won't have empathy for the other side. But what really is happening is just empathy. It's because paradigm A tricked us into believing with our mind, and I like to call this my mind heart, where we create this idea of good and bad in our minds by looking at all the circumstances that we can possibly get, and then we say, well, I'm a good person because I take this stand. And then we direct. That's why people are exhausted today, because they keep watching all of these horrible things, and they're only producing empathy. And empathy is going to connect us with the suffering of the other person, which in another term is pity. And so what we're offering actually, from our mind heart, we believe ourselves to be good because look at me suffer for that person. And then you go out every day and you tell everybody I'm a good person in different ways, virtue signaling, saying I'm a good person because I feel bad for this person, and I feel bad for that idea, and I feel bad for this idea. And it's all being processed through the mind heart, but people are exhausted, and that's the important thing to pay attention to, because compassion is a frequency. It's a higher level frequency. So when we actually go into a compassionate state, we go into our heart, we're actually elevating ourselves. And that is our gift back to the world. That's our gift to those people that are suffering. And so when we really truly understand compassion, it is we will spend our days more likely to want to continue to facilitate that compassion, this upper state that we can gift back to the world, but we're also giving the gift back to ourselves. So if you look at it this way, is paradigm A is the give and take. So that's exactly what it is. I'll take your suffering in the empathetic mindset. I will hold your suffering if you take some of my suffering, and then it becomes a give and take, and become just absolutely overwhelmed. They have their minds working every day to find out if they're owed anything for the day or if they have to give something for the day. Whereas in paradigm B, we're activators. So what do? We spend our day activating. We spend our day in this higher vibration, knowing that it is our gift to everyone else. Another good example of that is when, and now I'm talking about remotely, but let's just go to a premise in spirituality, which is to just sit with somebody in presence. There's a term for it called to hold space. So what are you doing when you're holding space? You hold a higher frequency. And you start to understand that when you look at the Bible and you look at Jesus differently, if you look at him through the idea of paradigm B, you see that what he was saying, there was the miracle where he was being pawed at by a group of people, and then somebody touches him, and he turns around and he said, "Who touched me?" And the woman says, "It was me." And he said, "You were healed, and the reason was through your own faith." So he understood Jesus was simply holding that compassionate state, and then it was up to the other people to come into alignment. If we would look at it from a different way, instead of saying it's a healing, we can look at it into that Jesus was able to hold a high frequency And because that person had faith in that frequency, was able to match that frequency and go into it. So same thing when you're holding space for people. So then compassion becomes something that you can actually get up for every day. Not like that's the mentality of paradigm A, is that you get up to be exhausted at the end of the day. Because what is actually happening is you put your mind heart into play, and you are exhausted by the end of the day because you're sending people pity. You're saying and then you're making memes about it, and you're showing everybody how empathetic you are, and you're exhausted. The whole idea of paradigm B is every day you're waking to find more these beautiful sensations you can connect with in your heart. That's even more compassion that you're able to gift to the world, gift to the presence of the people that you come into contact with. And so then compassion becomes much more tangible. And that's the interesting thing about paradigm A, is that a person, if they have any ability to look objectively and just look at what is posted, you could see that it is a bunch of people who think they have it right, who think they are the good person, and then they find really creative ways. And I am guilty of this. I can remember 15 years ago figuring out ways with my mind to show people how empathetic I am and how I'm on the right side of things. And I laugh at that self now because I understand better, but I didn't understand it then, because people would always say, you got to have compassion. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. I don't know what that means. And now having an understanding of compassion comes through the heart. It does not go through the mind heart. And that's another way to just look at paradigm A. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. You can look at it. It's both happening on both sides. It's both a race for who is the most moral person, who is the good person. And I would recommend, in the B perspective, that the thing that we get rid of is the right and wrong and good and bad. And the thing that we are striving for in the narrative that paradigm brings B gifts to us is beauty. We're finding the most beautiful way to look at the world, the most beautiful way to offer ourselves to the world, to be in service to ourselves. So I hope this was helpful. If there's anything else you would like a little expansion on, please let me know.